rising, climate change is real. How does that affect the mission of the Coast Guard in the years ahead?
Yeah. On a number of fronts, Senator. We did see in 2012 record recedents of sea ice, and as earlier mentioned, a fourfold increase in human activity just in the last 4 years up in the Arctic domain. Clearly one of the most pristine environments on the face of the Earth. We're encouraged by the progress of the Polar Code as we look at some of those challenges. But the immediate ones that I see are environmental stewardship and safety of life at sea in a very remote portion of our Arctic. We are an Arctic nation, but I don't have the capacity I need to be present for the myriad threats that we're going to see in that domain.
So right now, you don't have the capacity to deal with this unfolding change.
I do not.
You do not. And I think that's important for us to understand that climate change is having an impact on the Coast Guard's ability to do its job. And in an increasingly ice-free Arctic Ocean, there is a demand for new oil drilling up there. You're talking about human activity, and oil drilling is a human activity. And last week, the Coast Guard released its report on the Shell oil drilling rig that ran aground in Alaska on December 31st, 2012, as it was being towed back from the Arctic during a period of bad weather. The report, your report, found that a number of serious problems, including that a desire by Shell to avoid potentially having to pay millions of dollars in taxes on the rig, had remained in Alaskan waters on January 1st, influenced the company's decision on the timing of moving the rig. Just to avoid taxes, they kept it in a dangerous situation. The report found that Shell continued to move the rig despite forecasts of increasingly bad weather shortly after departure, and it uncovered numerous problems with key pieces of equipment and deficiencies in pre-voyage inspections. Do you think that before Shell or any other company attempts to drill again in the harsh environment of the Arctic, all of the issues identified in the Coast Guard report should be addressed to ensure that Shell or any other company is operating to the highest possible safety standards?
Senator, I could not agree more and look forward to working with this committee. There were not procedures in place for towing mechanisms, and that towing system failed. And of course, there were also several other systems that failed but were not reported in a timely manner, and obviously there were some risk management decisions that would cause one to question, was that a prudent course of action? But first and foremost would be working with the Towing Safety Advisory Committee as we look at better procedures to safeguard the movement of vessels under tow in the Arctic, and certainly I will look forward to working with this committee in that endeavor.
Thank you. Just to follow up on that, then, the Coast Guard report found that Shell's towing plan was, quote, not adequate for the winter towing operation crossing the Gulf of Alaska. The plan was not adequately reviewed and lacked the proper contingency planning. The report further found that there is, quote, a lack of regulatory requirement for the Coast Guard to review or approve towing operations of this nature. Do you believe that the Coast Guard should work with Congress so that there is an ability to properly review these plans to ensure that they are not deficient?
Senator, absolutely.
Thank you. And finally, Admiral, I wanted to raise with you the Coast Guard's December 27, 2013 Notice of Proposed Rulemaking entitled Assessment Framework and Organizational Restatement Regarding Presumption of Certain Regulations issued by the Coast Guard. Nobody but the Judge Advocate General of the Coast Guard probably knows what that means. But I am concerned that the Coast Guard is moving forward on this rule without adequately consulting the states. I am concerned that it could have the unintended consequence of negatively impacting states' laws protecting their coasts. In particular, I'm worried that it may impact Massachusetts' Oil Spill Prevention and Response Act that was passed in the wake of the 2003 oil spill in Buzzards Bay, which caused extensive damage in a critical coastal area for commercial and recreational fishing and other coastal businesses. Will you commit to looking at the rationale for this proposed rulemaking and engaging and engaging with the state of Massachusetts and other concerned states on this issue to make sure that the law of unintended consequences or intended consequences, which runs contrary to state interest, is in fact kept in mind.
Certainly, Senator. I mean, as someone who grew up in Connecticut, I actually caught my stripers in Buzzards Bay. So I'm very well familiar with the concerns of the state of Massachusetts. Certainly, any federal rulemaking would be through a public hearing process, engaging all stakeholders, and addressing the very concerns that the state of Massachusetts has raised as it applies to barge movement through Buzzards Bay.
Beautiful.
You have my commitment.
Thank you, sir. And I'm with you. You're going to do a great job. Thank you.
Senator Markey, can I just be rude enough, because your question interested me, because I assume that means that what you passed in Massachusetts is stronger and more stringent than what we have done.
We don't know exactly what is going to happen in terms of impacting our ability to protect our own coastline. We just wanted to make sure, Governor Patrick actually, and the state, they wanted me to make sure that we put this flag out there just to make sure that what they do is done in conjunction with the state of Massachusetts and other states to not have our ability to protect our coastline.
Well spoken by the Northeast. We now move, Vice Admiral, I can't thank you enough. When you talk, I think you said 37 years? of
That's
service?
correct. Almost a career.
That's a very long time. I think I have to pay special respects to your wife. You know, we in politics sometimes think that we're busy and that we're always off. Actually, when you retire from politics, you don't have to raise money, do you? And you don't have to do all the things. In any event, I think you've done superbly. You have certain constraints. When I asked you, for example, about the difference between a Russian and a U.S.